Very good. Okay. Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers welcomes you to our monthly author showcase. I am Peter Stockwell, your host. Author Bill Reeder is visiting with us this month at the Bremerton Kitsap Access Television. We have been friends for several years, attending church together at St. Anthony of Egypt Episcopal Church in Silverdale, Washington. A few years ago, he related a story to our members which set my heart on fire for him to write a book about his experience as a prisoner of the North Vietnamese during the Vietnam War. He explained to me that such a book was actually in production. And after a few years of revisions and editing, his story is now available in hardback. Bill, provide our Claw and BCAT audience with an overview of your history and the resulting book, Through the Valley, My Captivity in Vietnam.
I will. Thank you, Peter. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. My experience is essentially that I was a young teenager off the streets of Los Angeles at the age of 19 when I enlisted in the U.S. Army as a private. I went through officer candidate school, flight school, became a pilot, went to Vietnam, first tour of duty in Vietnam flying fixed-wing reconnaissance airplanes, second tour of duty flying Cobra attack helicopters. And that was the tour of duty that I was shot down and captured in early 1972, spending nearly a year, 11 months as a prisoner of war. Upon release, I finished a full military career and retired in 1995 with 30 years of service in the Army.
Well, very good. One of the aspects of your story was the ability to sustain a mindset for survival in some of the most horrific circumstances. Describe for us the emotional and physical endurance you developed.
Well, first, I'd say it was a good thing I was a young man of 25 years old when all of this happened, because there's no way I could survive something like that today. I had to be physically fit, and I was. I'd been an athlete, and I was very physically fit. My mental preparation was really nothing beyond just living a life with some challenges and struggles as a young man until I found my niche in the Army. But then once captured, I think what gave me the capacity to endure was principally faith, faith in God, faith in country, faith in my family, and then a hope that I never lost. I kept hope throughout the entire ordeal.
Now, you had sustained some serious injuries.
Yeah, I had. When I was shot down, as I said, I went over in my second tour as an attack helicopter pilot, flying Cobra gunships.
Yeah.
The day I was shot down, the aircraft took multiple hits from some fairly large caliber anti-aircraft weapons and came down spinning and burning with no directional control and little more than a semi-controlled crash. So through that, the injuries I sustained were a shell fragment wound in my ankle, a broken back, superficial wounds on my face which were bleeding quite a bit, and some burns on the back of my neck. So I was hurt very badly when I was shot down.
And you survived it because of your attitude and your physical. I'm so glad you did. This memoir of your military experiences and that fateful day of your capture has many messages for any of us, really. Why should a person read this book which relates the worst of human interactions?
There was a time that I wondered that myself. I set out writing this book very late, very many years after the occurrence, mainly because I was just so busy as an Army officer I didn't have time to write. I finally forced some time about 5 years ago, and it took me a period of about 4 years to get the book written. But as I would complete chapters or get substantial parts of the book done, I would bring them into my wife Melanie to review the chapters. She was my first reviewer, and her comments were the first comments I received. After I was getting fairly well into the book, I brought some reading in for her one evening, and my comment was, Melanie, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know why I'm doing this, I don't know who is going to want to read this. It strikes me as a series of unfortunate events. Nobody's going to want to read all these sad things that happened. She, at that time, said, Bill, no, I think quite the opposite. I think you should stick with this and get it done, because when you have this book finished, I think it will serve as an inspiration, as a motivation for others. So with that, I did press on. I did finish the book. That did influence my later chapters and how I ended the book. But I think with it done and published now, that the book does provide motivation, even inspiration for people, especially people who might be facing challenges in their lives, because this shows how I faced one horrendous challenge, how I came through it, and how I was able to put my life back in order when I returned.
Well, I know I kept cajoling you to finish the book.
You did.
And I'm glad that we finally got that book out, because I have read it, and it does give exactly what you're saying, the inspiration to people about how we can survive in situations that are not as horrendous as what you went through, but our ability to be able to survive. You had a book reading and signing event at our local Barnes & Noble here in Kitsap County last April 23rd.
Yes.
And I have some pictures that I took of you in this crowd, and we're going to see those. But you did have quite a crowd there. And there was a video of you reading, and it gives us a feel for the depth of your emotional state. So what I'd like to do is to play the video, and we'll let our audience see what it was and just the emotion that you were showing while this video was going on.
All right.
Careful in the back, it's okay. All right, thank you. All right. Tim called out enemy positions and weapons firing. All right, and so we were then covering this Huey, this slick, going into the parties with the intent of picking off that load of ammunition. The Huey turning and coming out, and we were the guns. We were the Cobra attack helicopters providing gun support for him so he could get in without getting shot down and get in. Right. Tim called out enemy positions and weapons firing as he saw them, using the minigun and chunker as he talked. So that's a machine gun and a grenade launcher in the nose of the helicopter. So Tim is my front seater, and these others in the turret weapons to suppress all of this enemy fire that we saw. I fired pairs of rockets just in front and alongside the Huey. My wingman did the same. Tracers and anti-aircraft airbursts appeared everywhere. We had jabbed a stick into a big, angry hornet's nest. The Huey came to a low hover near the command bunker. The crew kicked out the ammo boxes. The helicopter did a left hovering turn and took off. I began a sharp left turn so I could continue shooting suppressive fire for him. The enemy opened up on our two Cobras with everything they had. My view left, right, above, and below was filled with tracers. Tim fired continuously on those firing at us. We took large caliber hits all over the aircraft. Rounds came through the cockpit. Hits from small arms always felt something like Jiffy Pop popcorn popping against its tinfoil cover. These rounds seemed like a jackhammer slamming into the aircraft, beginning in the rear, working up the side, and then into the cockpit. The tail rotor was shot off and the engine was shot up. Every system on the helicopter was damaged in some way. Without the tail rotor, the aircraft began to spin. Fuel lines ruptured and we were burning. I keyed the microphone. This is 3-6, taking fire from 4 o'clock, taking fire everywhere, taking fire, taking hits, going down. Panther going down. The rotor RPM caution light flashed. The audio warning sounded, announcing that my rotor blades were turning dangerously slowly. I slammed the collective down hard to auto-rotate. Under optimal conditions, this is a controlled emergency descent. Under these conditions, I could only hope to lessen the severity of the crash. We corkscrewed down in flames. As I wrestled the aircraft, I radioed my wingman. Flame, his name was Flame because he had bright red hair. Flame, you better get in here quick and get us out. No answer. They were fighting for their lives. I learned years later that when I called taking hits, Flame had banked his Cobra and fired rockets onto the positions shooting at me. As he did so, a big 51 caliber anti-aircraft round came through the cockpit and tore into his chest, high on the left side. Bob, who was flying his front seat, Bob took the controls and headed for help, flying from the front seat. My Cobra came down spinning and burning. It hit the ground hard, nose low on the left side. It bounced back into the air, spun another turn and a half, and crashed. It settled nearly upright. Fire engulfed the cockpit. I called to Tim on the intercom. It's one of those passages not good for junior high kids. So let's get out of this thing. Roger that. As narrow as a Cobra is, it often ends on one side or the other in a crash. Since the front seat canopy opens to the left and the back seat to the right, if the helicopter lands on its side, one crew member would be trapped. We both could get out. We were lucky. I was badly...
Well, that was fascinating. I think now we have an appreciation of the work that you did while researching and writing your book. You were interviewed also by David Hartman during the Warbirds in Review at the EAA Air Show. That was the Venture Fly-In, wasn't it called?
Yeah, Air Venture Fly-In, yes.
Yeah, at Oshkosh, Wisconsin in late July. Tell us about that.
That was extraordinary. First, I had no idea I was going to be interviewed by David Hartman. I was invited to the EAA Air Venture, which is a huge air show each year in Oshkosh. There's about 700,000 people, over 10,000 aircraft fly in for that, and I knew that I was going to be interviewed. And I showed up at the site of the event, and there was David Hartman. Introduced himself. We actually got to chat for about 30 minutes before we went out there for the interview. And then I was interviewed along with another gentleman with the two aircraft that I had flown in Vietnam parked right behind me. It was quite an emotional experience, it really was.
Yes, I have seen the video, and we will have a link for all of you to see where that video is and let you view it on your own time. It was very emotional, and you were one of two people being interviewed by David that day. Now, when you returned from Vietnam, life had some real surprises for you. Can you let us in on your life after going to war?
Yeah, some of the, well, there's some of the surprises I won't specify because they're in the book and I need to capture readers to read the story and find out the surprises. But others, yeah, I was medically a mess when I got back. I had all the injuries that I just described, and then in addition to that, while I was a prisoner, I got three kinds of malaria, three different kinds of malaria, one of them most often fatal that I survived. I got dysentery, I got malabsorption syndrome, that I couldn't, my stomach wasn't absorbing things properly. I'd also had an ankle wound, that ankle wound that I mentioned got so infected it almost cost me my life. So when I got home, I had all these medical issues to address. Oh, and my back had been broken, so that had to be dealt with. I was medically unfit to fly, but there is one stipulation in Army regulation that will allow you to continue to fly with a waiver from the Surgeon General, and I was able to get a waiver and continue my flying career throughout. Some of the other things that happened, my marriage did not last, but I eventually met a wonderful young woman who I am married to now. We'll be going on our 30th anniversary this coming year. Melanie, just fantastic. So that has turned out to be a really great surprise. Of course, my kids, coming home to them, my two kids that I had at the time, Spencer now getting ready to turn 50 next year, and Victoria, who will be 46. They were a huge inspiration for me, so coming back to them was a very good and positive surprise, and the ability, you know, not only to fly, but to be able to continue my military career and end up spending 30 years in the Army.
And your wife, Melanie, is also a retired colonel in the Army.
She is, yeah. We are two retired Army colonels living in a Navy community here in the Bremerton area of Washington State. Yeah, we love it. In fact, Melanie has gone to the dark side now and works for the Navy, out at Bangor Sub Base with the U.S. Navy Northwest Region. Yeah.
In a general sense, has writing this book been a help for you? I know it has enhanced my own life, knowing what you have gone through and endured. And I just feel myself blessed to have you as a friend. And it's been now, what, about over 10 years since you've been in this area.
Yeah, actually 12 years here, which is odd in itself, being a retired military guy. I moved every year to 2 years, only lived one place 3 years in my life. And now we've been here in Kitsap County for 12 years. But yeah, writing the book overall has been a cathartic experience. I mean, I feel better now that the book is written. I am glad that it's published. It helped me in writing it. I hope that it helps others who might read it. The process of writing the book, though, was difficult. Since I'd returned, I had given a few talks about my prisoner of war experience, but it just hit the high points and did not get into a lot of detail. And that's where that whole story sat in my mind for decades until I sat down to write this book. In writing the book, I had to dig deep into my memories and come up with the detail that was needed for the book. And where I did not have a crystal clear recollection of events as they had happened, I contacted others who had shared those combat experiences with me and other prisoners who had been with me in prison camp to be sure I got all the facts as right as I possibly could get them. In going that deep, in revisiting, in fact, in reliving those events almost every night as I'd come home from work and sit and write in the evenings and write on the weekends, it became very unsettling to get back and relive those moments. And when I'd go to bed at night, often I'd have not so good dreams about the things that I had conjured up in my mind that day and that evening. So the process of writing the book was difficult, oftentimes unsettling, but now that it's done and finished, I think I am better for it, and I hope it helps other people.
Well, I know you certainly, you come across as much more comfortable now in having gotten this book out.
Thank you.
Now, since retiring from the Army as a very highly decorated colonel, you have been working in a leadership capacity with NATO. Is there anything that you're planning on writing in another book that might tell about your experiences as a military officer? I mean, you and I have related that you do have another book that you're working on.
I have another book. There's nothing directly related to the work that I am doing with NATO now or that I had done previously with the Stryker Brigade combat teams at Fort Lewis. I've been involved in leadership development of the commanders and senior staff officers of the Stryker organizations, now with working for the last 4 years, going on 5, with NATO Special Operations, doing similar things with the leadership of NATO Special Operations Forces. I don't know, I have no plans to write anything on that right now, and I don't know that I will. A book that I am working on now goes back to events in Vietnam. I'm writing about a battle which is covered on about 2 pages in my book, but as I got into researching it for the book, it became clear to me that there is a history wanting to be told of that battle, so I'm working on a book to cover that. The name of the book is Charlie, simply Charlie, and it's the story of a fight at Firebase Charlie in April of 1972, where a 470-man Vietnamese battalion, Vietnamese airborne battalion with 1 American advisor, fought fiercely for several days, and out of that battle only 36 survived with the American advisor, and that's a story that I think needs to be told. Beyond that, no, I haven't given a whole bunch of thought to where I might go from there.
Well, you told me about one fiction book you had started, but it was related mostly to your experience as a prisoner. Wasn't that true? And that was dropped in order to get the...
Oh, okay, yeah.
book.
I was about to put the interview on the spot here and say, Peter, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't remember that. No, I do, thank you. The book that I wrote started out
as a fiction,
as a historical novel. The reason for that was when I got back, I wanted to write something someday. I did not want to write another "this happened to me" story. There were a few books out by former prisoners. I didn't want to do that. But what I did want to do is tell the story of those prisoners captured in South Vietnam, which was a different story than that of the pilots who were shot down and captured in the North. And that's a widely understood story of that experience. So I felt it was important to tell this story that had not yet been adequately told, but I didn't want to do it as if this happened to me. So I set out to write a historical novel. Everything in it was going to be true, but the characters, or the story would be told through about a half a dozen fictional characters. Yeah, I cranked that out, got about 5 pages or 5 chapters done, and gave it to an acquaintance that I had made who has become a good friend over the years, Joe Galloway, who wrote a book called We Were Soldiers Once and Young, turned into a movie starring Mel Gibson. Joe read what I had done, very kindly came back to me and said, "Hey, son, I see what you're trying to do with the novel, but I suggest you just tell your story." Well, that deflated my balloon for a long time, for many years, but finally, as I said, 5 years ago, after hearing that same thing from a couple of other people, I set about writing the book that is a "this happened to me" story, but I hope I have tempered that a bit.
Well, you know, historical fiction's actually a pretty good place. We don't know whether you're going to get done with it or not, but you know, whatever happens, happens. But do you have any other works in your literary pipeline going on?
Well, I got the Charlie book that I mentioned that I want to get
Charlie,
done, and then you reminded me with the reference to historical fiction. There is one other book based on my military experience that I might write that will be a historical novel, because what happened is too embarrassing to too many people to use any real names. But I'll try and keep all the incidents to what really happened, and that would look at a unit that I flew with on my first tour of duty in Vietnam, a Mohawk reconnaissance airplane unit, and the insanity and shenanigans that took place with that group of people would border on what you might recollect from a book and later a movie called...
So the Robin Williams movie?
No. It's, I'll think of it in a minute and then tell you.
Okay.
No, it's an old movie. Catch-22.
Oh, Catch-22, yes.
That's what I was trying to think of. Thank you.
We'll get that in there.
Okay.
Yeah, Catch-22. That was good. So you're going to write a book that's going along the lines of being a Catch-22 style of book.
I think I might. I think that may be the only way to tell that story of those guys in that unit and the things that happened, as crazy as it was.
So I will continue to cajole you at church until you get that one finished.
You can do that, and then
and
yeah,
you can cajole me to get mine finished too. So
and
we'll
however
work
long
together.
this writing continues, there's some other books that I might look at based on family events over time. I think of Pat Conroy, who wrote The Great Santini, based on his experiences with his dad as a young guy, and then he went on to a whole slew of other books that essentially are fictional works, but inspired at least by his family experiences.
Very good. If a book club or other organization wanted to invite you to speak, how can they contact you?
They can contact me on my email, which is readerws@yahoo.com,
Okay.
or they can call me. My phone number is 360-830-9538, and those would be the best ways to get a hold of me.
Well, and our audience, we will have those on the, as you can see, they're posted on the page below us, so just keep a look out for them. I'd like to give you the final word. Is there anything you'd like to pass on to our BCAT audience about how you work through this craft, this art of writing? What do you do?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because I did not set out to learn the craft of writing. I did not set out to be an author. I was a serving military officer who had a story in my mind from my experience as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. And I felt a need, indeed a compulsion, to write that story. And I think that was, with me at least, the overriding motivation was to get that story written and get it down on paper. And I did that. So I guess if we turned that into any advice for anyone, it would be just to set yourself to focus on the task at hand. If you have something that you feel compelled to write, then sit down and write it, because feeling compelled to write and actually doing the writing are two different things, and it is difficult to do the writing. You've got to be disciplined, you've got to set time aside, and you've got to do it and continue to do it day after day, week after week, month after month, and in some cases, year after year. Having done this, I certainly improved my writing style in the process, have become a much better writer, am very gratified that I finished this work, and would hope that anyone that set out to be a writer would find that same satisfaction.
Yeah, I know. I have been to writing conferences, and one of the authors was asked, "What inspires you to write?" And he says, "Well, I write when I'm inspired." That's true. And so what I do is I make sure at 9 o'clock in the morning when I wake up until 12 o'clock, I'm inspired. So he has a set time to do it. Do you have a set time where you write?
Yeah, my set time has been when I finish my work for the day, which sometimes is some very long days. I would then set that time to sit and write for at least an hour to 2 to 3 or more hours. That turned into some very late evenings.
Yes. Well, and I know you do a lot of traveling for your work with NATO, and that can interfere with writing, I'm pretty sure. Well, Bill, I want to thank you for coming out to record this show. Your courage and dedication to duty should be an inspiration to any of us and to many people around the world. And I look forward to working with you continually at church at St. Anthony's and in our community of Silverdale. And I would like to thank all of our viewers for turning in to Bremerton Kitsap Access Television and viewing this Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers production. I also wish to thank the BCAT staff on cameras and in the director's chair. And our next broadcast, which is scheduled for February, when another one of our fascinating artists of Kitsap County will grace your TV screen. So keep in touch with our Facebook pages to see what Kitsap author we will be interviewing. I hope everyone has a pleasant day and a productive and fascinating new year. And until next time, I am Peter Stockwell with the Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers in conjunction with Bremerton Kitsap Access Television. Have a great day.